some people would say Beijing can still make a policy change, given the fact that after 2001's elections, Beijing somewhat softened to the Green and inviting the DPP members with China. But others can still argue at that time, Beijing, that was before Chen Shui-bian made the announcement of one China on each side. So now since Beijing already calculated him as a fundamentalist, so the more likely the DPP become a dominating party in the legislative union, the less likely for Beijing to have any hope on Taiwan. So that's two kind of speculation, but I think it is safe to say if the Green become the majority party, take a majority seats in the legislative union, so domestic power gains will not stop to become a factor when Beijing make its policy to Taiwan. The first point. How much time?
Embedded in a kind of dilemma. I'm going to raise three kinds of dilemma. I think unless they solve these dilemmas, I think even after the election, they're even deeper immersed in these dilemmas. The first dilemma, actually, is the most important one. It is also the intuitive reaction for them to solve the frustration. That is to define the red line. And it is a huge dilemma, whether to define it or not to define it, whether to define it clearly or unclearly. Let me put it this way. It's a failure. But they have to, because if you don't move it backward, you cannot defend the original red line anyway. That means you are going to face the failure right away. So you have to move it before you face the failure. So you have to move it. But once Taiwan sees that, we're going to push ahead the salami strategy. It means that's successful. So this is one thing. Another thing, if they move it forward by, for example, strengthening the tough-handedness, then there's they are going to fall into a security dilemma. Because if you move it forward, move the red line forward, from Taiwan's perspective, we think that you are engaging us in a chicken game. Listen, in such a chicken game, Taiwan cannot back down. Because once we back down, we don't know whether you're going to push it forward further. So at this step, we cannot face back down. So we're going to toughen our position again. So that's a chicken game. We're getting deeper and deeper into that chicken game. It's a security dilemma. It's not good for anyone. This is what's going on right now. Okay, so that's a dilemma one. And if you, the first part of dilemma one. If you keep the red line, it's still a dilemma, because if you keep the red line, according to what Taiwan has been doing, that is the salami strategy, we will exhaust everything before we touch the real red line. We are not going to touch the red line. Not at all. But we'll do everything else except the red line. If you're going to keep that red line, you keep that red line. I'll do everything else. But from Beijing's perspective, it's approaching the red line. So are they to keep it or not? It's a dilemma. Then, if they don't, they move to the first choice. They either back down or they push ahead. No good for anyone. So that's the first dilemma. The second dilemma has to do with the red line. That is the dilemma between the soft hand and the tough hand. If, for example, as Dr. Lingang argues in your paper, that China has a problem, PRC has a problem in defining what Taiwan independence is. That is very, very similar to define the red line. A little bit different, but very similar. Actually, according to what Beijing has said, almost everything we're doing is approaching Taiwan independence, except to accept the one China principle, which is totally impossible for any administration in Taiwan to accept in the foreseeable, future, according to the definition of what Beijing argues about one China principle. So what does that mean? It means that your soft goal, the real goal, the compromise goal, is unrealistic within the Taiwanese domestic politics. If you put your goal at that point, you are forcing both sides to take the tough hand. Okay, let's forget about Taiwan. Let's go back to China. If China is, by definition, by the nature of the way they define their goal, they're going to be frustrated. So they're forced by themselves to take the tough hand. Which means what? Which means they're going to be frustrated by their tough hand too, because it goes nowhere. It goes nowhere. So again, you have a dilemma between soft hand and tough hand. Unless you redefine the content of, so to speak, one China principle in a more relaxed way. But no, there are many suggestions to that. But it seems to me it's very difficult for Beijing to consider that. For what reason? For the third dilemma, a dilemma between domestic politics and international politics. When there's an opportunity in the international politics for them to readjust their position on one China policy, sometimes they have problems in domestic. So to come to the conclusion, since I'm running out of time, I think domestic politics is the most important factor for China to reach a more, let's say, feasible Taiwan policy by both soft hand and tough hand. It is not until that the political atmosphere within Chinese politics allows the leader to renovate their Taiwan policy, the guideline of Taiwan policy, to overhaul it, that can Beijing be successful to use both soft hand and tough hand to reach that goal, that redefined goal. And if the domestic political situation mature, I hope that international conditions will be helpful too. Well, that depends. So I'm not directly commenting upon Dr. Lin's paper.
DVP principle, that is, democracy, peace, and prosperity. The first pillar is democracy. I think in the DVP resolution adopted in May 1999 regarding Taiwan's future, the status quo of an independent sovereign Taiwan can only be changed through a democratic process with the Taiwanese explicit consent. And the second pillar is the peace. Upon taking office, I think President Chen has proposed several initiatives to compromise with China. For example, he proposed that Taiwan can jointly deal with the question of a future one China with Chinese government. In addition, President Chen also placed so-called 4 Norths and 1 have not, or 5 Norths, to stabilize the close relations. On December 31st, 2000, President Chen pronounced that the integration of bilateral economics, trade, and culture across the Taiwan's trade should be a starting point for gradually building faith and confidence in each other. And finally, on January 1st, 2003, President Chen urged both sides across the Taiwan's trade to strive towards building a framework of interaction for peace and stability. So based upon these examples, I believe the peace principle is a very important element of Taiwan's policy toward China. And third pillar is the prosperity. Since May 2000, to better balance the needs of economic development and national security concern, the Central Bank administration has discarded the long-held no-hesitation policy, 阶级用人政策, and adopted a new policy called active openness and effective management. Thereafter, Taiwan has gradually but surely come to relax its regulation on both
mentioned in passing. Most of his attention is focused on his ideas for cross-straits political instability framework, which is, quite frankly, a proposal which is dead on arrival in Beijing. It's not going to be accepted. I think it's a proposal which is useful domestically in Taiwan to try and build greater support for his approach, but not useful in dealing with Beijing. So it's not encouraging that he shapes his own comments this way. The fact that Joseph Wu has been appointed head of the MAC Council may be an encouraging factor, because Joseph has been one member of the DPP who has in the past argued very strongly for moving ahead with this cross-strait Santon negotiating process. And I don't know how it's going to come out, but I think Professor Tung is absolutely correct in focusing in on this aspect of the cross-strait relationship as the one where progress may be possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's why they lost the election, because they were unable to grasp to the local development and the value, the core values, so-called core values, and I think that's going to continue to trouble the political forces ahead. And whether they will be able to stick together, I think so, because they are right now really not in very good position. They have no chance to split further. Thank you.
Very good.
mean there is one China, both the mainland and the Taiwan belong to the one China. It's a definition. There are some little bit easier for Taipei to accept. If Taipei was said according to the constitution of ROC, there is also one China. So this issue can be answered in that way. That's what Beijing's expectation for that's called. But I also noted said independence. Independence, of course, if Taiwan moved toward to change the national title, change the territory or sovereignty, that we consider a pure independence in Taiwan. But Beijing cannot.
So if you're going to follow a law, you have to follow a good law. Number one, it's impractical. Number two, I think that it's going to actually heighten the tensions.
I think this idea actually was first initiated by a professor that he is a moderate. And he considered unification as a long process. So to win over Taiwan, China has better to trade itself first. So that's a long process, but unification is a remote goal. But then later on, some people try to also have some law regarding the anti-independence, opposing independence law. So how do you define independence? Under what condition China can use force against Taiwan legally? China now talking about rule of law, right? So legally, so that we make a government decision making easier than just involved in the difficult times.
All right, I have a dilemma, because there's more hands out there than there's time to allow these
series of possible policy choices. It's not a policy by itself. Let's understand this. And third, then it comes to so-called dilemma. Beijing will never give you clearly defined red lines. But it will let you guess. But then at one point, they will do something. And history is important in this regard. So most meaningless war in the 20th century human history is Chinese invasion of Vietnam in 1979. Chinese invasion of Taiwan, if that happens, it will be more meaningful, justable, compared with that war in 1979. And China fought that war in 1979. I don't see why China will not be able to find reason or support to fight another war against Taiwan. That's why it's not that the law itself is causing tension. It is that it's tension here. And then the unification law issue emerged.
All right, I'm going to allow the three paper givers to respond if they want.
It's not a negotiating document, and I think it shouldn't be looked at as